Hey, everybody. What's going on? It's another episode of Getting to Know Seahawks Twitter. That's Stacy Rost. Her hair is fabulous, and she's drinking a La Croix. And we've got no Russell Wilson to talk about. Embargo. No Russell Wilson allowed. We can only talk about free agency and perhaps our frustration, Stacy, with the fact that on St. Patrick's Day at 3:36 p.m. Pacific time, the Seahawks have done one thing. They signed Ahkello Witherspoon and they re-signed Poona Ford. Thoughts?
Well, have they done one thing? Because you know what I would also count as free agent moves is decisions to not sign people.
Oh.
So, for instance, they presumably decided not to compete or bargain or counter offer whatever Shaquill Griffin got from the Jags. I say Jags because I've gotten a lot of flack for saying Jaguars. I don't know how you're supposed
You can't pronounce it? You know, I like how the British pronounce it because they say Jaguar. I don't know why they do it that way. It sounds very fancy, though. Look,
they made Megan walk. I don't respect anything they do. You couldn't hang on to the one good thing that happened to you. Anyways, I think that was the right move. I mean, it's hard to say because Shaquill Griffin was a fan favorite. Everyone loved him. He was a solid starter. He kind of had this Mike Cameron kind of thing where like you're filling in for someone that was really great. And you're never going to meet that bar because the bar you're trying to meet is someone that's going to be a Hall of Famer. So he became a really reliable starter, 4 years. Is he someone the Seahawks should have paid that much money for? I don't think so. I mean, at least not with the limitations they had. So that's a decision. I'm counting that as a free agent, part of their free agent kind of grade. Decision to keep Poona Ford was wise. They have no depth there, and I really like him.
No.
And it was an affordable deal. Ahkello Witherspoon is, what you can afford.
Right. $4 million for Ahkello Witherspoon. Actually, some good history on Ahkello Witherspoon. I want to go back to a word you said about Shaquill Griffin, though. I think you hit the nail on the head. Reliable. Is reliable worth paying $15 million a year? And it's only for 2 seasons. I don't think it would kill you cap-wise. But Griffin is one of those corners who I think is above average to good. And I feel like you might have reached the ceiling of how much better he can get. I don't think all of a sudden he's going to turn into one of the top corners in the league. So you have that decision to make. And it seems like the Seahawks did, to a point, want to try and keep Shaquill Griffin. Whatever the Jaguars were offering was just a lot more. I guess the conversation started, they were like really far apart. And then maybe they got some, oh, wait, we want what we can't have feelings at the very end when he goes off to Jacksonville.
Yeah. Oh, yes, I'm confirming.
You know, I don't think that it's that big of a loss, but at the same time, you get worse. And do you want to get even marginally worse after a first-round playoff exit? I don't know, but that's sort of where you're at right now. And this is, I would imagine, the first of perhaps some sad departures that we're about to see.
Well, you kind of got to pick and choose. Like, I completely understand. And I hope I don't sound patronizing saying like, hey, you only get certain things, but that's kind of what it is. Like, we're going into the store. You can't have everything. I'm giving you, $50 or whatever. You don't get to choose to take something from every single aisle. When you're paying your middle linebacker $18 million a year, and when you're about to pay your strong safety, let's say he wants like 15, 16 or more than that, likely more than that is what he's going to push for. You don't get a ton of money to spend on corners. You don't get a ton of money to spend on edge rushers. Because also, I forgot to tell you, you're paying $11 million a year to your defensive tackle. So again, Seattle, when you're investing money in their top paid players are going to be Bobby Wagner, Russell Wilson, and obviously not in order, Dwayne Brown, Tyler Lockett. You're going to have to pay DK Metcalf, figure something out next year. You got to pick and choose. And that means making sacrifices at other positions. And so I know that in an ideal world, you would go out and in free agency, you would find another steal. Maybe it's a guy like DJ Reed, who wasn't necessarily in free agency. He was just claimed from waivers. And they knew that he would be a while before he could really play. That's not often what you find. You don't often find like really good players in a bargain bin. you get guys that are going to probably be worse than the guys you're letting go. There's a reason Shaquill Griffin was able to command the contract he is from Jacksonville and Ahkello Witherspoon isn't. Does it mean you significantly downgraded? I don't know. We'll see what Witherspoon looks like. But it does mean that you chose to prioritize other players and positions over left cornerback.
What aisle of the grocery store to go with that metaphor a little bit further would the cornerback group be for the Seattle Seahawks right now?
I'm thinking like suites or something. So obviously any skill position or cornerbacks would be something that like is kind of excessive. And you know, I'm talking like cookies, candy, crackers. Both defensive and offensive lines are going to be produce. You have to have it all the time. It's not glorious. It's not fun. It doesn't get all the attention or commercials or jingles, but like you need it as part of your diet. And in fact, you need pretty good ones.
Let's get to the produce in a second. I want to stay in the sweets aisle. We had an issue this winter because we were both looking for a specific brand of Oreo cookies. I was luckily able to find it twice. Poor Stacy was
so mad at you for that.
Well, I gave you one of the cookies. I was going to give you like 6, and I ate them before you got in. They were gingerbread Oreos. Oh my goodness, they were so good. And they were limited edition, those sons of biscuits. They didn't make any more. But if you were to make cornerback the sweets aisle, Shaquill Griffin is, I would say, a high brand version of oatmeal cookies or some other cookies.
Sure.
They're good, but you could probably get some pretty solid sweets. You know the bargain sweets that you see at the grocery store? You can get like those sugar topped oatmeal cookies for basically like $1.99 and it's like 40 of them. I mean, they're probably not good for you and maybe are made of like radioactive waste and stuff, but they taste just as good and they're cheaper and more bang for your buck. So that's what they did with DJ Reed, as you mentioned. And that, I think, is what they're trying to do with Ahkello Witherspoon, who is a guy that did start before and actually looked really good at the beginning of 2019. He had a game against Mike Evans where he actually played really well. Then he got hurt. He came back. His confidence apparently was shaken. He gave up a ton of touchdowns and he got benched a couple of times. And next thing you know, he falls out of favor entirely.
Well, and you haven't seen Shaquill Griffin with that kind of, again, like it's, as you know, we see all kinds of stuff on the text line when we're on air, whenever people are mad about a trade or excited or whatever it is, or a signing. And so unsurprisingly, people are like, why did we get this guy that's been benched? And it's like, because you don't have a lot of money to spend. So that's what you had to do. I mean, in this case, you're not looking at like the Chips Ahoy cookie. You're looking at like this Nature Valley kind of like biscuity thing where it's like, is it what I would choose? No. But presented to me over other options, I guess it's not so bad. All of a sudden I'm having 4 of them. Like that's kind of what this is, right? It's like, it's not your premier choice, but it's serviceable. Like it's with a ceiling that is higher than he's been playing. Maybe not Griffin, but higher than he's been playing. And here's the other thing too. You aren't going to have, every team is going to have weaknesses. This league is built for parity. And where you choose to invest, whether it's money, whether it's drafting, whatever it is, you're going to make sacrifices elsewhere. So let's say that your passing defense or your secondary, specifically your corner play, let's say your corner play continues to be a liability for you next year. And maybe you're someone who is higher on the corners and maybe I'll be eating crow. But let's just say hypothetically, your corner play is a weakness of your defense. Well, you traded 2 first-rounders for a safety. So make sure Jamal Adams is phenomenal. You're paying Bobby Wagner $18 million. Let's make sure he has another all-pro season. You know what I mean? You let Carlos Dunlap walk. Well, let's hope that your second-round pick, Darrell Taylor, who you said, John Schneider, you almost took in the first round. Let's hope he can get you some sacks so that quarterbacks don't have 5 seconds to find Ahkello Witherspoon being beaten by a guy and throw to him. Like, how about you make the moves that you've already done? Some very expensive moves pay off. And then we won't be complaining so much about like a cookie or treat we don't like as much because we've got other cool stuff.
Yeah.
We've got like top shelf stuff.
I think you're right here. And I said this morning. I'm sure other people have said it. I said it as if I were someone who had just had this incredible thought come to him as if I'm an NFL savant. But it was essentially, additions are going to get you headlines during the offseason, but ultimately, if you want to win a championship, you got to develop well. And you need to see guys like DJ Reed perhaps continue from where you found him. Can he get better? Ugo Amadi, Marquise Blair, who we didn't see, Darrell Taylor, who we haven't seen. Some of these guys are going to have to turn into something. Otherwise, you're not going to have much on this defense. And you're right. Bobby Wagner, that's a lot of money. Jamal Adams, a lot of draft picks, going to eventually be a lot of money. Both of those guys, I imagine, are going to be here for the next couple of seasons. But you have to find guys that contribute elsewhere. And that's the tricky part about it. But I understand why people pull their hair out and get really frustrated when a move doesn't happen. And you were doing the show after I went off the air, and I remember when we went off the air, we found out that Rodney Hudson, the center for the Las Vegas Raiders, we thought he had been released. He asked for a release, and we're like, what? Why did the Raiders get rid of him? Oh, yeah, John Gruden and Mike Mayock don't really know what they're doing. That kind of makes sense. But then we found out, oh, wait, he didn't actually get released. Now we find he has been traded to the Arizona Cardinals, but the Cardinals gave up, I think, more than you'd expect for a guy that seemed like he was about to be released, a third-round pick they send over to bring him aboard. What was the general reaction, first off, from Jake, who I imagine was heartbroken, from you and everybody else in that moment?
You know what I'm going to start by saying is it is so weird to me how many people assume that everything Jake says is a direct reflection of what Russell Wilson thinks. For instance, in real life, we were on the show because Jake doesn't hide it. Like, people will be like, you should disclose your relationship. Like, it's in his Twitter bio. Like, he doesn't hide the fact that, like, he trains Russ in the offseason and is friends with him. And he'll say that on the air, but then he'll also be like, oh, and also I'm a quarterback. Of course, I'm going to be talking about how offensive linemen are great and how they should be passing it more. I would want to do that. Would this happen while we were on air? And like Curtis and I have like a Twitter, a DM that we all send each other NFL news. So that gets in there. Like 10 seconds later, he tweets out like, oh, the Seahawks have to make this move. And to both of us, he's like, oh man, this guy's awesome. And immediately people were like breaking down whether or not I saw this on Reddit. I don't mean to be a troll. Now it sounds like I was creepy, like viewing you guys, but I was. I clicked on the link and I read it. That he was like getting that info from Wilson. And I was like, in what time? Like, in what subject? Obviously, he genuinely felt that way. He was genuinely excited. And so he was really bummed, but he knew it wasn't. There's no way this is happening. I could have told you, and we did say, everyone knew the Seahawks are not going to get Joe Thuney. The Seahawks are not going to get Corey Linsley. And the Seahawks are not going to get Hudson. And the second that we found out, oh, they're making him available to acquire via trade and not just whatever movement you can create with your cap, well, now they're definitely out of it, because what are they going to trade? They got 4 picks. So, and they don't, I don't think they have a third rounder. So,
no.
Yeah, Jake was very sad. Very sad.
Some people are going to argue that they should have sent a second rounder. And, you know, part of me thinks to that idea, well, I mean, you got like 3 picks if you get rid of it and they're all at the back of the draft. Is that going to help you out long term? But there's another part of me, Stacy, that thinks, okay, the Seahawks have done pretty well trading draft picks for veterans. That pick that you have at the back of the second round, it's probably not going to be much of a contributor this coming season. It might be. I mean, you might find another DK Metcalf, but I feel like now that you've hit the lottery with that one, you're probably not going to get it again. There's a part of me that feels like, yeah, probably wouldn't have been smart. But since you kind of are already all in, I mean, Rodney Hudson's been one of the best centers in the NFL for a while. And no offense to Ethan Posick or Joey Hunt, but I don't want centers that are going to get demolished by Aaron Donald 2 times a season.
Yeah, no, I love my all petite squad and I talk about them all the time, but there are very few members of my all petite squad that can actually be like dominant athletes. I mean, they're out there. We're out here.
Is Joey Hunt on the all petite squad?
He was on not the all petite squad.
Oh.
He was briefly on the petite squad.
A reserve.
Me championing a couple petites.
I want to hear about this petite squad. Let's go down this rabbit hole.
Squad. The all petite squad?
Yes.
Okay, so now the thing about the all petite squad is it is specifically petite athletes across sports.
Okay.
For instance, you can have both Mookie Betts and Wes Welker.
Okay.
You could have who else would be on my all petite squad? Tyler Lockett's on my all petite squad.
Okay. Is it a height thing or is it a size thing? Is it a weight thing? Because
it is. It was initially a height thing. So
Okay.
like Blair Walsh would be on he wouldn't be on the all petite squad, but he would briefly be on the petite squad.
Okay.
Where I just root for my fellow petites. And obviously it's said in jest, since most of these guys are not actually, they're like 5'9", 5'10". The joke is that they aren't petite.
They're not as tall as you. A lot of people know you're 6'8", and it's weird.
Oh my God.
It just comes off strange on the camera.
I had someone believe that I was. Not the person you were responding to, but one time someone was trying to insult me and he was like, I just hate tall women. And I was like, you're weird, but also thank you. Wow.
That's a really weird thing to hate.
It's that's you hate yourself.
That's 5'5" energy from a guy, right?
That's absolutely, yes. He wishes he was on the petite squad.
Yeah.
He's not.
He didn't make it.
Yeah, the all petite squad's pretty tight. If you think of anyone else that should be on it, please let me know.
I want to put Steph Curry in this because as someone who's really sensitive about being skinny, I hate being skinny. I try to not be skinny, actually. And I know everyone's like, oh, well, a lot of people don't want to be skinny. No, I mean, I work out to try to get bigger. And I've been doing this for years and years. And I've got to a certain point where I can't get any bigger than 170 to 172 pounds or so unless I start drinking a lot, which doesn't really, make things look better. So I get super frustrated when I can't get any bigger. And everyone hates on Steph Curry. So even though Steph Curry's like 6'3" or so.
Yeah, he's definitely not on the petite squad.
Okay.
You can have a set. Why don't you have an all lanky squad?
The Lankies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh,
you can
okay.
Start your own squad, and you have to be like in the bottom 2 percentile of like BMI.
Okay. You know what? I like this. We will have to come back and revisit this at some point. But you were going on a thought about just on the interior, you do need to have bigger guys than who you've had. And with Hudson now gone, I really would have thought about that second round pick for Hudson, because I look at what you're going to get this offseason. I don't think you're necessarily going to do better than that. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know that you're going to do worse. Honestly, I'm way too lazy to evaluate offensive linemen that are out there on the open market, but he seemed like a guy that checks a lot of the boxes.
Yeah, well, evaluating offensive linemen is always really hard, I think, for a lot of people, because it's like you're great if you're kind of quiet, like quietly dominant. They don't have to go out there and get the best guys ever. But it is weird, as a side note, that Russell Wilson critiqued it. And it's fair to say, hey, you shouldn't have said that publicly. Like, that's rude. Like, yeah, it is. If I was Dwayne Brown, I'd be like, wow.
What?
But it is literally a position they need. Mike Iupati's retired. What is your option there? Like Phil Haynes, who's been injured and hasn't played a ton. Like, you have to go get somebody. You need somebody. If you bring back Ethan Posick and sign someone else, like, cool. But like, you need a guard. That's not a secret. That's not an opinion. You literally need one. So yeah, it doesn't have to be the best guys ever, but like, if there is one commonality among some of the teams, that were in the postseason, it would be offensive line play. I think Kansas City, and this is from Pro Football Focus, Kansas City by the end of the season, I think, was ranked 11th. Seattle was somewhere around 15, although I think that's not a weighted average. But like Tampa Bay was something like number 2 or whatever. LA was in the top. You had most of the teams that were in the postseason, I think New Orleans might have been in there, were within the top 11 of offensive line rankings. It is an important part of football. That sounds like such a stupid thing to say. It is an important part of football, and they need to be better there. That shouldn't be controversial. It's just a fact. They need to be better at a lot of other places too, including your quarterback play, which struggled late last season a lot. You need to be better with game planning. Like, it is really weird in general. It helps that you kind of saw this team falling apart in the final weeks of the season. Like, we could have known by the latter few games, this offense isn't going to hang in there.
It's still strange, though, because they were 6-2 down the stretch. I don't disagree with you. There were moments, though, where I thought they figured it out. And I'd specifically point to the second half against the Rams. I was like, oh, look at that. all of a sudden that's the old Russ. And there was that final stretch against the 49ers where I think I talked myself into believing, yeah, they looked at the 49ers. They probably weren't as up for that game as they needed to be. And as the game wore along, they found that championship DNA and were able to get the game won. And then the next game happens, and I mean, wow.
And it's trash. They look awful. Well, it's really weird. They're such a good regular season team. They're a great regular season team, one of the winningest in the last several years. And it hasn't been able to translate to the postseason. You've had 1 win in 4 years, and I think 3 wins since your last trip to the Super Bowl, unless I'm mistaken. It's not weird, right? In general, it is hard to win in any sport. Like, there's a reason that outside of your New England Patriots, Paul, most teams have not been that dominant for that long. In fact, no other team outside of New England has been that dominant.
And by the way, losing record last year too. So, I mean, it doesn't last forever. All it takes is one guy leaving. Forever.
And the league, like I said earlier, it's built for parity. So it's not a critique to say, hey, you didn't win the Super Bowl every year. No one does. It is kind of weird that a team that is one of the winningest over the last several seasons has so few playoff wins.
Yeah.
I don't know what falls apart, but something does.
They're not alone on that front too, though. You can definitely point at the last couple of years of Drew Brees and the Saints. I mean, they had some really talented teams, and they had some really disappointing playoff losses along the way.
I don't know, but they've been to the NFC Championship since then. Like, I would count that as a success.
Yeah,
if Seattle got to the divisional round this year, I would count that as a success, because that's one more playoff win. And getting to the NFC Championship, even if you don't get to a Super Bowl, is nothing to like shake your head at. No. Like, that's still really impressive. Packers fans are probably furious that they've gone 13-3 and just come up short both times. That's still really dominant. You were the second best team in your conference by the end of it, essentially.
What are you supposed to do after that? And as we continue to look at free agency, and look, as we were recording this at about 4:00 on a St. Patrick's Day in the midst of free agency, I think we're both of the assumption that we will be sitting back and waiting for the Seahawks to do something. For all we know, something's going to happen, and we're going to be like, YOLO. But when you do end up, as you mentioned with the Packers, 13-3 and losing in the NFC Championship game back-to-back years. One year you get blown out. The next year, I mean, you hung around and you were in the game the entirety of the way, and you just weren't able to take advantage of 3 straight Tom Brady interceptions, which you probably should have been able to. So then how do you go back to the drawing board? It's a little easier to feel like you need to do something in the drawing board when you are Seattle. They do need to do something. I do hope that they are not telling themselves, well, for the most part, if we bring back most of the same pieces, it's all going to be fine, especially when we're still not 100% sure about some of those pieces. You mentioned Dunlap earlier. Honestly, I would like to know KJ Wright's on this team, given the season that he just had, even if it does require probably paying him a little more. It seems like he wants some. And also, Chris Carson, too. Who knows what's going to happen with him?
Wait, Paul, are you recording this?
I am recording this, yes. What happened?
Okay.
Did something happen?
I was looking on my end and it didn't say record, so I was like, oh no, man.
No, this is being recorded through another software, but not through Zoom. Yes, this is... Yeah. Oh, right, because, listen... I don't trust Zoom, I guess, is what I'm trying to say here.
What's that mean? You think it's like the Furby that's in the government office that's hearing things and it's going to repeat them?
Yes. I think big tech is all... No, I'm just kidding. I don't know what I'm saying right now. I'm just rambling incoherently. As you take a look, though, at what needs to be done, there is this feeling, I think, held by a lot of people that the Seahawks need to do something now. And this is their best chance to do something, given that they only have one of these draft picks. And yet, they are probably going to do as they always do, go back to the offensive line help that they need. They are going to look for a really bizarre, overlooked item in the produce section.
Yes, most definitely. They're going to pick up like I don't even know.
Quinoa?
It's going to be, that's not in the produce section. It's going to be this off-brand cabbage that you're like, wait, what?
It's Irish cabbage.
Yeah, or like a radish. And you're like, I mean, sure, on tacos once in a while, that's fine. But is it what I thought when I went to the store that I wanted a radish? I guess. That's what they're going to do for the offensive line.
A radish.
So what kind of pieces are they removed, or what do they need to do to get there?
Right. I mean, a radish is not the finishing touch, nor is a beet.
I think that there are fundamental things they need to fix. I think that, first of all, the young talent they have needs to meet their ceiling. I think that, for instance, you've used your second pick of a draft on Marquise Blair, who I won't count last year against him because he suffered an ACL tear early and by all accounts from training camp looked wonderful. So he still has lots of time to prove things and it feels early to knock him. You need to get him on the field. Like, you've traded to acquire 2 safeties in his place. So now you've got this extra safety that you've spent high draft capital on, a pick you wouldn't have this year. And you're trying to maybe make him a nickel corner.
Right.
Like maybe he'll succeed there. But like now you're stuck figuring out how to get someone you drafted before DK Metcalf on the field. And you don't have like blue chip talent out of every single draft or even especially several. But like, can we get something to work out here is what I would be thinking if I'm John Schneider. And so I think it starts with that. I think it starts with the guys you've already drafted playing well and getting on the field and performing, especially when you have little draft capital and few draft picks. Use what you have, right? Like DIY yourself to a Super Bowl. Like use what you already have in the building. You can't afford to go out and get like this really cool kit of things to make. You got to kind of build it yourself. But thankfully you have some pieces. At least you think you do.
Right.
You spent draft capital on it.
Yeah.
Another thing I think is there's some trends that they need to work on. And a trend can have a lot of causes. For instance, the trend of slow starts is something that is a truth for a lot of their playoff losses with each of their last several losses. So against the Rams this year, the Packers the year prior, Dallas, and then in 2016 Atlanta, they were trailing at the half. Well, what goes into a slow start? I think people
Snooze
that are
buttons.
mad at Carroll will say coaching. I think people that are mad at Wilson will say, well, the offense need to score more points. I think people that feel like the defense could be better will say, well, don't allow, 123 yards from Ezekiel Elliott. And all of that's fair because when you have a persistent pattern or a persistent trend, there are persistent issues. And far more often than not, there are multiple issues. How do you buy your way out of that?
Yeah.
How do you buy your way out of slow starts?
I don't think you
buy
can.
your way out of, you know what I mean? I think that there are other issues. I don't know that they're off the field. There are other issues that this team needs to figure out. And I know it sounds like such a generalization to say get on the same page, but it was a problem for them last year.
And it has been in years past. And now I think about it. I think with Shane Waldron aboard that there's some potential for change there. But I do think that there is a bad habit in Pete, and I'm not saying that he is alone on this front. I think a lot of coaches have this issue. But there is a general overpatience that Pete has sometimes in the midst of games. And I almost wonder if, you see him chomping away on that gum as a game goes along, and you'd think he's a little more tense or stressed or perhaps wanting to make things happen rapido. And yet there are moments where they move in slow motion. Now, I don't know if that correlates, Stacy, to the slow starts, but my goodness, how many times have we seen the team move slow to the line of scrimmage and end up calling a timeout where they don't need to?
1,000%. What's so interesting about that too, and you like inadvertently brought it up, is this kind of sense of sureness in himself that Pete Carroll has is exactly the same mindset Russell Wilson has, which again goes to highlight that these two men seemingly have much in common, yet are at odds with how they want to win. It's fascinating. All of this is fascinating. I know for fans, it's frustrating, and I completely understand because you invest so much of yourself in your team, right?
Yeah.
You invest your time and your energy and your emotion and passion, and it's generational. Your parents watch them and their parents, obviously, depending on how old the organization is. As someone kind of watching from the outside, it's just a fascinating thing. It's the story of the Seahawks over the last couple of years is one that, like, oh my gosh, like I could talk about for hours and hours. Like it really is an examination of breaking the mold when it comes to finding success and all the little things that can tear that apart that kind of blossom in the business of the NFL.
We just broke the mold because we barely talked about Russell Wilson versus Pete Carroll.
Nor did we talk about Meghan Markle, the latter of which I'm upset about.
Okay, well, I mean, now's your chance. I mean, let's hear the Meghan Markle takes that you have been waiting to drop on everyone.
Wow. Okay, here's my biggest thing about Meghan Markle. The big critique that I always hear from people and by hear from people, I mean see on Twitter, because all of my friends are normal and they are on my side with this, is that if she didn't want attention on her, it's weird that she's going to Oprah and having this interview or getting her Netflix deal. And I'm like, look, she's an actress who married into the royal family. She's not someone that like isn't okay with attention. She's someone that married into a family that she thought would defend her and treat her fairly, that didn't. And not only that, but then she found out that that family is very much more like a business than a family. And that's frustrating to be in and part of.
And she's got family issues of her own, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, her dad's an interesting character. Yeah.
Sue me, Thomas Markle.
The thing I've always wondered about that entire situation. So if you're a queen or a princess and you marry into this family, you're just, it seems, supposed to throw anything you had on the side out. And I would imagine, as you just mentioned, all right, now that they're out, I imagine Meghan wants to get back into doing what she's been doing before, because now she has that ability to do it. And I mean, now she might actually end up being the breadwinner of said family, given that I don't know what Harry's going to do.
Harry's like, I've never had a job.
Yeah.
I've been rich my whole life.
Two quick questions. Who is the Meghan Markle of the Seattle Seahawks?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. That is a great question. It's not Russell Wilson. I don't know that they have a Meghan Markle. Right now, Pete Carroll is someone that seemingly likes service. Meghan Markle is very service focused in the community and also very polarizing. And so I'll say that's the closest, but it's not a comparison that I think given more time I would make.
I think for some, Russ would be a fair comparison. For those who think that he is perhaps being held back and is trapped in this situation that's not working and he's trying to break free. One last question. You have to describe Seahawks Twitter in one word. We're both sort of members of Seahawks Twitter.
I'm not in Seahawks Twitter. I'm not allowed.
No, you are definitely allowed. I had somebody on. Listen, I like Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus, but Eric Eager is someone who is in, but he's not deep into Seahawks Twitter. He's more one of those. And I'm sorry, Eric, I'm making weird marionette hand gestures.
Why does he type like that?
I don't know. But if he does, I'm impressed because he put some good stuff together. Describe Seahawks Twitter in one word.
One word. One word.
No
one
more.
Word. One word.
You can't do it in more than one. Is not a word.
I want to say sarcastic, but something a little more painful than that. Just, you know what I mean? Just kind of sarcastic, but in a way that's just kind of like really gets at you.
There's a word.
Seahawks Twitter has a great self-awareness that like it eviscerates itself sometimes.
Ooh, I have the word. I thought this was actually correct. But I feel like I'm cheating by handing it off to you. Okay. Sardonic, adjective, grimly mocking, or cynical.
Yeah, that's good. I think the Seahawks Twitter, Seahawks Twitter. I think, again, I'm isolated. I've actually never covered another team. But I do follow a lot of people that regularly cover this team. And participate in a lot of these conversations. And I think that there's a lot of sarcasm. There's a lot of really cool, analytically minded people that I always learn stuff from. And me. Half the time I feel too dumb to understand it. And the other half the time I'm like, wow, I never thought of that before. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of both. It's like, I think it's a community that actually knows a lot about football. And so you get a lot of really cool conversations, but also it's a team. It's not like the Saints where they've had some heartbreaking endings to their season, but there is a kind of frustration, I think, that's there, understandably so, among kind of people in that community, because they're like, I don't understand. There's a franchise quarterback and a GM and a head coach that should all be winning, but every single year they lose in the wild card round or don't. Like there's a frustration underneath all of it. That's just kind of like, you're stunned. You're befuddled. You're baffled.
Ooh, I think I like befuddled the most. Honestly, everyone should just blame Tom Brady because it's all Tom Brady's fault. This is why we
don't make me fight with you again about Drew Brees and Tom Brady. I don't want to ruin our friendship.
They're just not on the same page. It's fine.
That might do it.
Not everyone's on the same page as him. Fine. We'll leave it at that. Stacy, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Jake and Stacy every single day from 11 to 2. Hot takes, sports, and right now a lot of Seahawks takes. And no one has been signed in the last 30 minutes. So how about that? At least that I know.
There you go. Now we learned.
The one and only Stacy. Arya's, I don't know. Oh, Arya's in trouble. Arya got up on the top shelf of my closet somehow, which means she climbed up my clothes again. And now that means I have to find the clothes that she tore holes in to claw up.
Your clothes don't matter, not compared to Arya.
I mean,
she's your child.
Do you see this ridiculous shirt? It's Lucky Charms.
I haven't been able to stop looking at it, Paul. I'm going to be really honest with you. There was a question you asked earlier, and I don't know if I even answered it because I was looking at your shirt. I don't remember anything about the question, but I like the shirt.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The Lucky Charms. They're always after me, Lucky Charms. Stacy, you're the best. Thank you.
Bye, Paul.